Hi, my name's Christy Earle, and I've done my research paper on the Aztecs and its empire. The Aztec Empire was founded in the 1300 AD and consisted of an alliance of three different tribes: the Tenochca, the Mexica, and the Aztecs. This alliance would soon become what we know as Aztec Empire and would be ruled through a monarchy. At the top of the social class would be the emperor, second would be the nobles, third would be the commoners, and finally the slaves. The location of this empire was in Central America, or present-day Mexico, but specifically in the Valley of Mexico. The Valley of Mexico was 40 miles wide and 70 miles long. The empire had neighbors to the north and to the south. The neighbors to the north were the Chichimecas, which was a slang term used by the Aztecs in referral to those who they believed were beneath them to the north. The tribes that consisted of the Chichimecas was the Zacatecos, the Cazazanes, and the Gue Chichiles. The neighbors to the south was the Mayans. The Aztecs went through wet and dry seasons. The wet seasons consisted of torrential thunderstorms, and the dry seasons would consist of harsh sunlight. Due to their climate, the Aztecs' way of life was influenced greatly. Their crops consisted of maize, beans, and squash, and the animals they were able to hunt were deer, wild pigs, birds that migrated south for the winter, and fish from the ocean. The clothing that the Aztecs wore was loose and covered very little of their body. They were made of cotton or ayate fibers. The men wore loincloths or the tamatali. The tamatali was a cloak that could be used to keep the sun off the Aztec men's back, or as an apron to carry things. As nobility, their loincloths were able to be embroidered or be of better quality. So by looking at the loincloth, you could tell who was of what social standing. The women were able to wear skirts or blouses. The Aztecs invented the atlatl, which was a device that was used to throw spears, and it extended the thrower's throwing arm, and it allowed them to throw their spear, which would be the tepiotopie, able to throw that up to 100 meters farther than what they could throw with just their hand. They also invented the macueatl, which was an obsidian blade which could be used as a weapon in war or in their sacrificial rituals. They also invented the chinapas. The chinapas was a stationary island that was built in the purpose of improving their agriculture. The chinapas actually doubled the amount of the Aztecs' harvest than what they had on their dry land. The Aztecs' home depended on the social standing. Commoners' homes consisted of straw, wood, and adobe to make up their homes. The nobility and royalty were able to use stones and adobe to keep their houses together. The nobility and royalty homes were often decorated and very spacious. The Aztec art was considered a religious act in which they were able to communicate with their gods and to show their appreciation. A notable collection of poetry that lived throughout time and made it through the Spanish conquest was the Romances de los Señores de la Nueva España. The Aztec religion was a bloody one. Their religion required human sacrifices, and to the different gods would require a different way to sacrifice their humans. For example, if they needed good luck on their next war conquest, the Aztecs would use their macuetl to slice open just below the rib cage and would actually reach up and grab the human sacrifice's beating heart and rip it out as an offering. Or if they believed that they needed rain to improve their harvest, they would take someone to the top of their temple and would actually drown them. The Aztec population in the beginning fluctuated due to the sacrifices, but during the height of the empire, the population rose to 15 to 20 million and steadily increased from there. The empire would include 38 city-states, which would offer tributes, warriors, and sacrifices. These tributes often consisted of the currency, which was quetzal, or cocoa beans. Cocoa beans was a currency because they were considered a rare commodity in the Aztec Empire and was treated with equal standing to the quetzal. The customs that the Aztecs had was that they believed that knowledge and education was needed by every man in their society. The young boys were taught from the age of 14, they were taught the academics and military tactics. So that way, by the time they graduated, they were able to join the military of the Aztecs. However, the schools were segregated by their social standing. For example, the nobility boys had their own school and the commoner boys had their own school. Another custom was that the Aztecs had great hygiene. Most Aztecs bathed at least once a day, and the Aztec emperors bathed at least twice a day, which I believe is why when the Spaniards brought in the smallpox is why it wiped them out. The people that I believed that should be noted was Acamapichli, which was the first emperor, and he actually facilitated the Triple Alliance and built the Aztec capital from the ground up on a place that no one wanted. No one had touched it for years. Secondly was Itzicoro. He was a former slave that joined the military and climbed through the ranks until he became emperor, which at that time should have been nearly impossible for him to do since slaves were at the bottom of the social standing. Finally, what I believed would be the last person to bring up was Montezuma II, because he was their last official ruler. Throughout his reign, he became obsessed with the supernatural and was very paranoid. So when the Spaniards showed up in their metal armor, he believed they looked like gods and opened them with welcoming arms. The Aztec ancestry was that in 1519, nearly 25 million Aztecs were killed, which was almost the entire population. The Aztecs ancestors that are alive today live near present-day Mexico City. None of the ancestors are full-blooded Aztec. They are all mixed bloods. And with nearly 1 million living ancestors in Mexico, they became the largest Aboriginal group in Mexico. They are still able to speak the Aztec language, Nahuatl, and they often struggle with illiteracy. However, the Aztec names for the states have made it through.